Most students plan their essays on responsibility in an inspector calls like this. The inspector teaches the characters about responsibility. The Burlings try to avoid blame. Priestley wants society to be more responsible. These ideas are relevant, but they remain too descriptive to reach grade 9. To reach grade 9, you need to track how Priestley presents responsibility as a conflict between selfish individualism and collective social duty across the entire play. Initially, furthermore, ultimately. Initially, Priestley presents the refusal of responsibility not as a personal failing, but as a worldview, a complete philosophy of selfishness that capitalism has made not only acceptable, but admirable. This is immediately clear when Mr. Burling dismisses the very idea of collective responsibility. Everybody has to look after everybody else, as if we were all mixed up together like bees in a hive, community and all that nonsense. The word nonsense is the most important word in this speech. Burling is not confused about what collective responsibility means. He understands it perfectly. He is choosing to dismiss it as absurd. Priestley presents the rejection of responsibility here not as ignorance, but as a conscious decision made by someone who benefits from a world where the powerful owe nothing to the vulnerable. Made by someone who benefits from a world where the powerful owe nothing to the vulnerable. The simile of bees in a hive is revealing in a way Burling does not intend. A hive is a system where every member contributes and every member depends on the others. There is no hierarchy of worth, no one exempt from obligation. Burling finds this idea repellent precisely because it would dismantle the class structure that protects him. Priestley uses the simile to show that collective responsibility is simple and natural. The phrase mixed up together is also carefully chosen. For Burling, the idea of social classes being interdependent is chaotic and threatening. It would mean acknowledging that his wealth and comfort are built on the labor of people he considers beneath him. Priestley presents this resistance not as eccentricity, but as the defining attitude of a ruling class determined to protect its own position at any cost. Importantly, this speech is delivered at an engagement party, a celebration of family and future. Yet Burling uses it to argue against the very idea of caring for others. Priestley is making a precise point. The Burling household looks like warmth and togetherness from the outside, but it is built on a philosophy that treats responsibility toward others as laughable. Initially then, Priestley presents irresponsibility not as a character flaw, but as a political position, one that the wealthy have always found it convenient to hold. Furthermore, Priestley presents the moment responsibility begins not as a dramatic conversion, but as something quieter and more fragile, the simple act of recognizing another person's humanity. And he gives that moment to the character least expected to have it. This becomes clear when Sheila challenges her father. But these girls aren't cheap labor, they're people. What Priestley is showing in this moment is the precise instant at which responsibility becomes possible. And what makes it possible is empathy. Sheila is not making an economic argument, she is making a moral one. She is insisting that these workers have an inner life, that they feel and suffer. The word but is the hinge the whole sentence turns on. It is not a polite disagreement, it is a refusal. Sheila is not asking her father to reconsider, she is telling him he is wrong. In an Edwardian household, this is not a small act. Priestley is showing that taking responsibility sometimes requires the courage to say what others in the room are carefully avoiding. The contrast between cheap labor and their people is where Priestley's argument lives. Cheap labor is what you call someone when you have decided they do not matter. People is what you call someone when you have accepted that they do. Priestley reduces the entire argument to this single exchange, and the two words win because they are true. Priestley also makes a deliberate structural choice here. Sheila is not the inspector. She has no authority, no supernatural force behind her. She is a young woman at a dinner table, saying something obvious that everyone else has chosen not to say. Responsibility only requires one person willing to acknowledge what they know. Furthermore then, Priestley presents responsibility as something that begins the moment we stop seeing other people as categories and start seeing them as human beings. Ultimately, Priestley presents the refusal of collective responsibility not as a private moral failure, but as something with consequences at civilizational scale. And he uses the inspector's final warning to make that argument impossible to ignore. This is clearest in the inspector's closing words before he leaves. And if men will not learn that lesson, then they will be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. The rule of three, fire and blood and anguish, is not metaphorical decoration. For a 1945 audience, these words describe something they had actually experienced. Priestley is making an explicit connection. The suffering of the 20th century was not random or inevitable. It was the consequence of a world organized around the philosophy Berling expressed at the start of the play. Every man for himself, community, and all that nonsense. The word taught is especially significant. It implies that the lesson of collective responsibility is coming whether society chooses to learn it or not. The only question is whether people accept it willingly, through empathy and moral change, or whether they are forced into it through catastrophe. Priestley presents responsibility here not as an optional virtue, but as a law of human society, as unavoidable as gravity. Refuse it, and the consequences will teach it for you. The inspector's earlier words reinforce this. We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other. The metaphor of a single body is precise. Damage one part, and the whole suffers. Berling's worldview is not just morally wrong, it is structurally unsustainable. A body that ignores its own damage does not survive. Importantly, the inspector delivers this warning and then leaves. He does not stay to see whether anyone acts on it. The choice belongs entirely to the audience. The question is not whether collective responsibility is real. The question is whether it will be accepted before or after the fire. Ultimately, Priestley presents responsibility as the single idea on which the future of society depends, and presents the cost of refusing it in the starkest terms. Priestley purposefully presents responsibility as the moral spine of the entire play. Not one theme among many, but the argument everything else is built around. Every character and scene is designed to ask, do you accept your responsibility to others, or don't you? Priestley links responsibility directly to power. Mr. Berling is a magistrate, a former Lord Mayor, a factory owner. Mrs. Berling runs a charity. Gerald Croft represents inherited wealth. These are not ordinary people failing. Priestley's argument is that power and responsibility are inseparable, and that a society which allows the powerful to opt out of responsibility will destroy itself. Ultimately, this forces the audience to realize that the play was written as an act of deliberate political urgency, written in 1944 to 1945, at a moment of huge social change. The inspector is not simply a dramatic device. He is Priestley's argument made flesh, arriving uninvited and refusing to leave until they have been made to look at what their choices have cost someone else. Priestley also wants the audience to feel that the inspector's question does not stay in the Berling's dining room. It follows them out of the theatre. The telephone rings at the close as a reminder that the reckoning is not over, that another inspector is coming, and that every generation has to answer for itself. Priestley's warning is that the answer has consequences either way. Subscribe to GCSE Litverse for more Grade 9 English Literature revision. Like the video if this helped you.